A disconcerting ending to the last video. I ran out of memory space. I was planning on making it to nighttime and cutting, but too much babbling. And, you know, if I run out of memory, I could store it and hope I can put it together or whatever. But I'm such a scatterbrain, I can't guarantee that. So here we are, starting just as we're going into evening. There may be another Austrian assault. The Austrians have captured Aspern, not with their first probing attack that came through the side, but just cutting straight through with one of their 3 corps that were ordered to take it. Only two engaged at all, and really only the one that took it really fought in the village. Advanced Guard has tried to engage at Essling. It's not capable of it. There's another full corps coming up to join it. That would give it a lot more force, but there's really there's no hope here. And Charles is way over here with his command center. He's got to move that, but he's also got to get his troops moving. So he's got a lot of problems in terms of trying to get something better, a better result out of this first day. I can't be too unhappy. I took Aspern, like fully took it. Of course, I'm taking some artillery fire because I'm parked in it, and the French are defending close enough, and I can't even respond because of the way this game works. Another French column making it across. The bridge is in good shape right now. I'm using random bridge. And, well, we'll get playing when I feel like it. Okay, end of the Austrian 7 p.m. turn, and what's happened? Not much. Charles gave orders to his army to move more centrally. He could actually afford to do that because it's just a general order in addition to giving 6th Corps its orders, which are to go take the pontoon bridge. With those Saint-Cyr's additional infantry coming in, 4th Corps is up to strength and may actually be able to defend everything at this point. Advanced Guard doesn't have much it can do. It managed to shoot. Now, one of the things I've always held this as weird. You can fire at skirmishers with artillery. That's something I think you couldn't do in Vive l'Empereur. But sensibly, it should make some value, especially on morale. But it actually, there's no penalty for doing so, which feels a little weird to me. It feels like skirmishers should sort of screen your infantry, but they shouldn't be taking the kind of damages that a formed unit would. Even a unit in a thin line is still so much more densely packed that a cannonball would have an effect. Now, canister, you know, I don't know. What the hell are skirmishers doing running up against cannons with canister? Well, they're plinking. This column is coming in. Remember, we're actually in columns, not corps, but it's treated as corps because, I don't know. All right, and I don't know if we're going to do the French turn. Probably, because the Austrian turn went by so quickly. If it had been a complicated Austrian turn, then the French would have to do all kind of stuff. But I don't have a hell of a lot of time. It's Friday. I got to go dancing, and that means tomorrow I may or may not get any gaming time in at all. Hard to tell. The event's still going on in my game, and I'm not going to succeed in the event, but there are still lots of goodies to grab, and I've expended so much that I don't know. Said the French turn, nothing much happens. I did pull those skirmishers back so they stopped getting plinked. I'm out of range of these guys. Thought I missed a firing opportunity on them. We got Saint-Cyr in place. We got Nansouty moving up. There aren't any reinforcements until the next bridge check, so unless something happens. We did have an event. It was a panic event, which can only happen to the French on the 22nd. So, again, one of those, oh, look. But, you know, that's fine. I find, I don't want the events to run the game, right? It's just, there are things that, especially in the battle-specific stuff, that I feel isn't adequately handled by the system as a whole. You could maybe say, well, it could happen or whatever, but it's kind of nice to have that extra flavor in it. In some cases, it's really important. Sometimes these games don't have as much scripting as I would like in them. Yeah, I know people don't usually like scripting that much, but I feel like the events give you a sort of way, especially to look into the commander's views. There used to be, in the oldest of the CWB games, this concept of like a commander profile, and that actually influenced play. They dropped that. It was a really intriguing concept. I didn't have any of the older games. I actually wrote to the gamers and asked, hey, do you have, a version, a copy of this portion of the rules or whatever? I would love to see what you did with it, of the basic rules. And boy, did it get me excited when I saw those. It looked like, you would have battle plans kind of formed by these commander, profiles, essentially. Like, they would have restrictions on things they could do, maybe bonuses on some things, penalties on others. All kind of neat stuff like that could be built into it. Well, it turned out it really, in the couple games where it was used, it really wasn't that extensive and exciting. But it was a really cool idea. It fits in really well with like McClellan, because no player would do with the knowledge that they have of what the battle's going to be, would react the way McClellan did. But his assessment of the intelligence he had was so far off base that if you had that assessment, you would. So it's sort of like the Charles is cautious type rule here. But instead of just baking it in as a formal rule across the board, it became more of an influence on around the edges more. But yeah, it wasn't as exciting as I had hoped it would be. I had hoped it would have things, I don't know, but it would handle things like hoods, disciplining and tactics and whatnot. For specific battles, it could really cover it could be a mechanism for delivering that kind of scripting and special rules, and I was kind of excited about that. Anyhow, after a couple of days of neglect, I'm back. Nothing going on. I'm not playing on the other machine, which is a good sign. I'm not playing on either machine right now. I'm still playing my main account, but not much happening in the game, which is perfectly fine. The Austrian turn, this column's coming up, and we'll have some attacks on Essling, but right now the Austrians are just sitting here milling about, standing near their cannons, polishing them and everything while the French shoot them, because I wanted them under no orders so that they could advance. That maybe, so what it may be is that it's an unrealistic situation for me to have placed the Austrians up here under no orders. However, there's something unreasonable about like the idea that, yeah, you're moving up and you're going to keep going, but just wait for those orders. There's no way to express I want you ready to move forward, but don't just sit there with your asses hanging out. And I find that completely obscene, what the game's doing. Again, this is stuff, remember, version 3.0 came out essentially, as a well-tested finished product, supposedly, but like any really major change, it's almost like a new system. And these more complex games, for whatever reason, the gamers tend to release things that have some real rough edges. New tactical designs, whatever. And this is one of them. And I think it might have cleared up had the series gotten the polishing that it needed. But it never got that. And that's kind of one of the, something needed to be done, but it wasn't. Anyway, enough on that. And, maybe I do the polishing on my own, maybe I don't. If I do it, it's kind of ad hoc and not terribly, I may not be consistent with it is the problem. And I don't know. Anyway. But yeah, Charles has gotten his orders out. His army finally moved. His army command moved. That was a D6. That was the one unit that took its command. The rest, the D5s, he's got a D4 as well. They didn't accept their orders. And they're probably going to accept them come nightfall, which really, there are ways around that as well. So when I say, maybe it was a mistake to put myself in no orders. But the thing is, the game lets you do that. And it seemed like the best solution because the no orders means I get an advantage on here towards moving. When clearly sitting around, milling around, not returning fire is not actually going to improve the chances of the army moving forward. And I was given this unrealistic, what I'd call a bullshit choice. It's clearly not, designed for effect, even though that's like, what I kind of linked to bullshit before. But this is a bullshit choice. It's not a realistic choice. The commanders on the scene would be unlimbering their guns and preparing them. Is there a situation where you might be sitting somewhere and not expecting to be attacked and it has that kind of freezing impetus? Maybe for a very short period of time. But, you would either skedaddle out of there or accept a semi-defensive order. It doesn't mean that you'd be committed to defense, right? In the sense that, it would affect your chance of accepting another order to do something more reasonable. There's just this sort of, what the hell is the guy on the actual position in command thinking? The guns are unlimbered, they're ready. No, don't fire them. Don't fire them unless they come close. It boggles the mind. It's creating an unbelievable situation, which is destroying, my acceptance of this game. What's needed is something in between, which is okay, you're in no orders, you take fire, and maybe you hunker down a little bit more. Maybe that makes it harder to accept orders or whatever, but you always have this option to drop into the default defense from no orders, or at least make a roll to do so, and if you fail the roll, you skedaddle, because you wouldn't just sit there. You wouldn't just sit there not returning fire. Pick up for some equally goofy orders orders-induced problems. Napoleon, and I should have done this earlier, I've been sitting around on top of Messina not remembering, but, busy with other things at the same time as I'm playing and I forget. He gave Messina orders, and they're really stupid. I've got fall back with headquarters. All I mean is for the 4th Corps headquarters to fall back a few hexes. This kind of order, it's ridiculous that Napoleon has to order Messina to do this, right? He had to come up and say, don't you think your headquarters is a little exposed? And while we're here, sitting here on the army headquarters right here, I also wrote the same kind of order for the army headquarters. Again, it's things that are spoiling the experience in terms of just a believability situation, which, big deal, not, I don't know. But it didn't feel like this kind of shit ever happened with the old defensive orders rules. I felt like I could express defensive orders that said what I wanted, and then you didn't get bolted down or anything like that. And no orders worked kind of nicely there. You had a certain amount of time to accept orders. It didn't make it easy enough to accept orders to defend when you were in the no orders type of status, but you know. So what you'd have happening is forces would fall back because of a core defense failure, and then they would fall back again and again. in which case, because they couldn't get orders within 2 turns or whatever. So, you know, I had no problem with any of the situations that arose from the defensive orders, but there was a little bit of silliness that could occur. It didn't tend to, because usually the attacker had orders to pretty much go to where the defender was defending and maybe a little beyond that. But they didn't just have orders to pursue the ball over the map. Which I never understood, and this has to do with the general system going through CWB and everything, whether or not you could write orders to pursue something all over the map. It seems like a valid order in some cases, like get contact. It's sort of a very much the search and destroy type missions from Vietnam and stuff like that. Get contact with the enemy and pursue them and run them to ground and take them down. Was that at all common? Well, no, but you would have pursuits of a routing force or whatever, where the game didn't really handle that well if that was disallowed. The way they worded it was, this is not a good order. You know, or things like attack west is not a good order. Well, I don't know, you know. Sometimes some of the games come with really, really simple orders, like capture Aspern. Okay, simple. I can live with that. Some of them have orders, and this one has it, go to Gross Enzerdorf and then capture Essling. But that makes sense because you had to kind of go out of your way to do it. But some of them had, you know, stopping points along the way for the orders and everything. And it's always been a very, very weird thing in terms of looking at the examples that the game gives to try to formulate your own interpretation of what are acceptable and unacceptable orders. Now, they say it's not a good order to say, you know, chase this unit down, but personally, I think it is perfectly fine under certain circumstances. Just, again, there's these rough edges that the order system never quite resolved. This isn't a version 3 thing. This is throughout all of them. Where things that you should be able to express, it's kind of questionable whether you can or not. This is not a good order, a good enough reason, you know, does that mean you shouldn't usually do it? Or does it mean you just can't do that? Delaying having to roll my pre-turn fire. You know, I came up with my own answers, which is you just shouldn't do that most of the time. But now and then you're allowed to. And, you know, that's not really very satisfying if you're playing a competitive situation. Even the way that I played it with you know, with my buddies, where maybe I'd question, are you sure your orders allow you to do that? You know, but yeah, it's certainly not conducive to the really, really ultra competitive type play that I guess some players like. Sometimes maybe I like. As I finish up the French turn, I'm not necessarily playing more than I was before. Develop this line here. I've got a lot of artillery on the 2-4. I may try to squeeze some of it up there or something because, well, I'd get opportunity fired if I go up there. I've thrown some skirmishers out in front in the woods here because why not? They're not going to get shot at, and they provide a little bit of barrier. Not a lot happening though. As long as there was something I wanted to mention. I don't remember what. There was a reason that I turned the camera on beyond just it's the end of a player turn. But I don't quite remember what it was. Yeah, not coming to me. My hopes for beating my addiction at this point took a setback. There's that event that's going on. It turns out it's bigger than I thought, and I still have a chance of maybe not completing it, but coming close enough that, I don't know. I don't know what comes, if I'm within just a few points of getting the big character from it. Like, my assumption is that those characters become available. Because I have some parts of other characters. Anyway. But nothing this impressive, so I don't know what the pieces relate to. And I don't feel like digging it out too much, but yeah, I've been blowing a lot of time on that today. However, we have the Austrian turn and almost everything, except I think the reserve, which is just the cav up here, are under orders now. All the chickens are going to come home to roost, and this is going to be the big turn where, this is about ready to hit, and these guys are all going to move forward. So, yeah, maybe that'll break me. We'll see. Okay, so here's the Austrian assault, crossing the stream here into the woods, all shaken. This could have been really exciting for the Austrians a little earlier, because there wasn't anything covering there when their orders were given. Unfortunately, now they're facing a fresh division, and it's probably not too great, but it will pin this division down. And what we're finding is, hitting here, some of those French units aren't in great shape. On the other hand, the Austrians that are hitting them aren't in great shape either. The main effort is coming this way towards Essling, and I'm kind of skirting to stay out of this gun's opportunity fire range, as well as this one. And then here, the 4th Corps or whatever is pushing up on the other side. And, if we can break the villages, we've done damn well. We took one early. That went remarkably easily compared to either the historical or I think whenever I've played it before. I think villages have changed a bit. Either that or my reticence towards conducting close combat made them, significantly better defensive locations under the old version 2 rules, and under the version 3, well, you ain't got a choice. So I'll plow right in and boom, I just made it through. I would guess though that because the old close combat system is based on fire combat, that the fire combat that happened in the villages was significantly a better defensive position than it seems to be under these new situations. Of course, you don't have to check for morale as the defender in a village, but you lose if the attacker succeeds, which is, that definitely was not the case under the old version. So yeah, and I think you had a morale benefit for it. So those villages used to be really sturdy defensive positions, which probably they should be. However, under the version 3, for what happened at Aspern Essling, instead just plowed right through because, didn't matter how good those French troops were, they're going to run as long as the Austrians make it. But here, things are going to be a little bit iffier because that Austrian 1st Corps is relatively beaten up. 6th Corps is not in great shape either. That's the one that got flung back. The hope is that I can still hold Aspern after making this attack. I think I can't really expect to take much with it. But if Essling falls and I can hold Aspern, nice things happen. I gotta go play my game, my other game, because I didn't play it at all yesterday on this computer. I don't know why, but I feel like I have to keep this account up. It's reached the level where like I should have just chosen, yeah, screw it, man, it's done. But my addiction is too high to make that decision. I don't abandon anything for the most part. So we will be hitting, well, we did the non-phasing fire. We did not do the non-phasing fire. We did the opportunity fire. Now comes the non-phasing fire, where there are some opportunities, especially over here at Labao. And then I have the big mess of close combats to do. Well, to hell with playing my second account. I decided it's just stupid for me to do it. I got to the point where I had made the decision not to and went on. All right, so what about this assault? Well, the big news is Napoleon got wounded, maybe dead. Because I can't move army headquarters freely, and he wanted to hang around on it and whatever. Yep, too bad. I mean, certainly, you know, you could avoid that kind of situation. There was no reason for Napoleon to actually be at his headquarters, but I'm used to doing that. And, you know, if I can't move my headquarters, I wouldn't put it past a good commander to be pushing them harder to get the move on. The enemy's coming. Let's get a little further back, guys. And also that it would look particularly cowardly to be hanging around behind the headquarters. But anyway, yeah, the fact that the headquarters was there certainly influenced Napoleon and Massena both being there. Either one could have gone. I don't know who I'm going to replace Napoleon with. It doesn't really make too much difference, but just because everything's fucked up. I don't have, I don't think there are replacement counters in this. Like, some of the games, well, I got a commander I can use. I got the aides de camp I could use, I guess. But yeah, there's generally, you promote from within, and what I think the case is I think they were gift counters or whatever, bonus counters, the Christmas counters that were given out for the CWB games. They gave you extra replacement counters so that if you promote everyone up, you have a counter to put on the map for the division or whatever that no longer has a commander. There is nothing of that nature here. There may be on the back. Yeah, there's just this. So yeah, if you lose an army commander, there's no easy way to do things. If you lose a corps commander, I think it works okay. Yeah, because they have the replacement ennies on the back of them. But losing an army commander means you're short a piece. Now, what's on the back of these aide-de-camps? A replacement aide-de-camp, which I could conceivably use. Or I could use the replacement of this leader. But anyway, those couple of spare counters that I found coming useful aren't here in this game. The leader doesn't mean a hell of a lot at the divisional level, but it is important for tracing zones and whatnot, and we're going to see a whole layer of people get promoted. Or maybe an aide-de-camp gets promoted to a divisional commander, I don't know. There's no rules for that. The attack mainly failed. The only success was here, where I was hitting a wrecked French unit that there was like one box left in it. One of the things is that because of all the counter, the dancing around the counters in this game, you look at a unit, I had some Jaegers here somewhere. Are they what made it here? Yeah. You look at a unit that, and you can see I kind of tried to write something in there. That was an AA-sized unit in the original game, and now it's a B-sized unit. And if you're going by the kind of, well, there's probably a lot left, and you don't look it up over there, you might make some really bad decisions. It was a pretty bad decision to charge into this space, except that the guys who were defending it, there was no one there. What I didn't notice is that this is the brickyard, and I treated it as if it was plain terrain. Oops. Yeah. It's hard to see the terrain because the counters basically fill the hex, and you get a reasonable density there. I wasn't going to go back and try to refigure everything. But yeah, otherwise the Austrian assault mainly broke, and you can see the effects of that up here. Some route through stuff here. That first corps was in no condition to be attacking. Charles should be ashamed of himself, but if he killed Napoleon, he wins. Big time. Brings up an interesting observation. At least I think it's interesting. When you look at Napoleonic battles, there are a hell of a lot of commanders who took several wounds throughout their career. Oudinot is the greatest example, who has some ridiculous amount, like 18 or 19 or something. But that leads you to wonder, I mean, if you look at the American Civil War, it feels to me like the survival rate of the commanders who took wounds is lower. You got your counterexample there with someone like Hood, but to whatever extent he was. But I'm wondering if some of this is to do more with the technology of how much of this has to do with the technology of the lower effectiveness of the muskets that are being used, because you do have a lot more riflery, of the artillery shells that are in place, but then also, was American medicine significantly worse than, a half century previous's European medicine? Just the battlefield medics. And I wouldn't be shocked if that was the case. There was nothing to advance the medical technique between the eras, and you kind of get the feeling that there may have been, just because of the regularity of wars and whatnot in Europe, there may have been a better quality of battlefield medicine being provided than, even some of the generals and whatnot would receive in the Civil War. Hard to tell. Without the playing on the extra machine, my life still feels a little empty. So I tried to go to sleep early, and that didn't work. And now it's relatively late. Watched some old comedy, and back to this, I guess. French side of the turn. Neither of the two headquarters that I want to pull back to try to save them, just in case something goes terribly wrong, can. Because again, I'm playing with the rules for the version 3, which don't include the option for the defensive orders. Defensive orders would have allowed me to avoid it. So there's actually more of a possibility of these things breaking when they're in healthy shape, of a corps just having a defense failure because I had to fall back a couple of hexes and now my headquarters is exposed. That doesn't happen in many games. It really had to do with, with the defensive position the French were in. And I don't mind it too much if you fall back that far. Usually it signifies a real problem. Usually you have a solid line and there's no room. There would have been room for the Austrians to slip around and just step on the headquarters and collapse the French line if they wanted to be gamey. But in this particular scenario, it actually feels like there's a fair chance of causing an emergency withdrawal through Corps headquarters. Now that would happen under defensive orders. The thing is, under defensive orders, you're not bolted down necessarily, depending on how you write them. So, yeah. After some relatively devastating phasing player fire, skirmishers are pretty damn impressive at times, picking off guns and whatnot, and hitting some morale, as well as some of the artillery fire caused some casualties. I ended up launching a cav charge against the brickyard again, which is again an error. I don't pretend to have meant to use it as a balancing factor. It wiped out the Jaegers and the skirmishers that were with them at the cost of one cav strength point. Remember, cav gets to stick around and butcher things if they win the battle, so that makes up for, when you look at the initial cav chart, you know, the losses are pretty close to each other, especially in this case. The attacker was attacking what was a fairly large unit, so it had a +1 on both sides of the table. So more cav is liable to get killed if you greatly outnumbered. Well, if you have a big force, whether you outnumber or not. In this case, I greatly outnumbered the enemy. But yeah, I don't know. You know, I'm not going to reverse it any more than I was going to reverse it the last time, but it is really hard to see. You know, most of the villages, they look like a village. You know, they take up a fair amount of space. Something like this could be just as problematic if it's part of a line. Part of it has to do with me wandering away and not paying a lot of attention to the game. But I could definitely see missing this, even though it's got, you know, victory point spaces and whatnot. So one cav already slammed through there. I'm not going to allow follow-up cav attacks through the village, though. Although they could actually enter the village, I think. Nope. But they could enter it through the road, but then they couldn't launch an attack. I don't know. I'm gonna limit the damage to that because technically the brickyard should have provided some defensive benefit for. Well, I don't know if it would have or not. It certainly should have prevented a cav charge into that space, but screw it. Let's just leave it as it is. I'm probably going to launch a couple of cav charges here, largely with the intention of chasing away his cav support, but maybe it's such a crapshoot when you do cav. It really is. It's like, I'm afraid to launch cav into this stuff. Just because there's a good chance the enemy will stand if they form square or whatever, and then all you've done is maybe slowed them down a little bit. It's probably not worth it. If they don't stand, you may not win. Well, if they don't stand, you win, and you get the charge successful. The danger is the repulse instead of if you don't get the break off. So yeah, but even if they don't stand, you can't do it with small cav units. I guess that's the big issue, because small cav units could just disintegrate and not get any follow-up attacks. But as long as you have big cav units hitting the infantry, that doesn't stand is safe. Now, it's not fair to be looking to see the morale value of the units, as far as I'm concerned. You wouldn't know that. So, yeah, unless you were really up on the regimental flags and whatnot, you really wouldn't know the quality of the forces that you're facing, except for how they're performing on the battlefield. I get some pretty lousy results against these infantry here, and they're not close enough to generate opportunity fires. So, you know, I lost like 3 cav factors, 2 off this thing, which almost has it wrecked. Remember, cav is valuable. You know, it's given an extra value in the system beyond its battle capabilities. And yeah, it's just not a good idea. Here, I don't know if I can withdraw there. I think that's just my army headquarters, so I can pull out of there, which may be my best answer, because otherwise I can't recuperate those units. I'm still working on the movement. Remember, the cav charges are integrated into the movement, so they generate, a lot of shit that happens as you're trying to figure out what the hell you're doing, and you're like, well, let's launch a cav attack. I actually prefer that, as I prefer the, in terms of play capability, I prefer that to what the Viva la Emperor has, which is sort of a cav charge phase, which really doesn't make a lot of sense to separate that out. The cav should be able to clear stuff for other units to move. Now, it kind of does by putting it earlier than the regular movement, but trying to think if there's a reason that you'd want to be able to move some units. Yes, and this may not be realistic. So this allows you to bring guns into place and unlimber them so that the cav charges can impact whether or not those guns get an opportunity fire. That may be stretching things a little much. I actually think the Viva la Emperor is more accurate. However, by doing it in movement instead of making it a cav charge phase, the cav charge phase in Viva la Emperor, all those charges are announced and handled and then resolved. So you announce them, you move your units, then you resolve them all. This allows you, and you could do that by having a pre-cav charge phase. This allows you to send a wave of cav in. If that doesn't work, send another wave of cav in. But the problem is, I get so discouraged when it doesn't work. And I'm like, well, once the unit is in square, for one thing, you know that it's a decent quality unit if it stands, right? If it's able to form square and stand, it's a reasonable unit. It also feels like cav is less likely to be successful here. Like, it is more likely to end up either in the break-off or repulse side of things. And that's a real crapshoot. Once they form square, once they decide to stand, the cav is really at risk, which is what we saw. 2 squares standing, nothing happened. Yeah, the cav just got really raped by it. Now, putting the infantry, the old system used to allow, the version 2.0 of Napoleonic Brigade Series, used to allow the infantry to work kind of like the cav do, which they do kind of in the villages, but to charge, it's not quite the same, to charge during movement, slam into something, and kind of clear the way for a further charge, possibly even a cav charge. That was really unrealistic, and I think the game has fixed that. Why do I like it for play to have them integrated into the movement? I'm trying to think, I thought there was a reason that I liked that, but I actually think it's easier to handle them the way Viva la Emperor does. But I seem to remember just a minute ago having an argument for the other direction, which is really confusing to me. Oh well. The reason that it's really unpleasant to do it during movement is you're breaking up your conception of, well, I'm moving this force, although again, the cav could be done all before movement, and that would probably hold together just fine. But you're also breaking up, hey, I moved some units, now I gotta go here and I gotta keep track of all the stuff on these and look at all the charts and everything. It's a high burden. Every close combat in this game is a high burden. Isolating them into their own phase makes the game a little simpler to play because you go down the line for each close combat and do that special thing as opposed to interrupting your movement plans and then having to come back. And if you're like me, you have trouble telling what the hell you're doing. The problem is if I fall back out of here where I'm disordered, first of all, I leave the army headquarters behind and say, screw it, whatever it was, it can run away on its own. It'll do that. It doesn't affect me at all, unlike the Corps Command. But there's artillery under here. I'll undergo opportunity fire when I back out, and I'll also undergo normal fire. Now, I'm going to get hit with normal fire no matter what, but 2 rounds of fire with disordered units, well, you know, if I'm going to break on the first round of fire, it's not going to make a difference anyway. But it also opens up a hole that I kind of don't want to face. However, what it does allow is if I pull back, it gives me a channel through which I can throw those cav. And that's the difference. I can move my infantry to make room for the cav. And actually, I think that's kind of necessary in this system. Because you can't charge through the infantry, so yeah. Of course, do I want to charge those guns? Probably not. I'm just not sure what this is going to do to my defensive posture if I fall back or get blown back, you know, by an attack. But there's a possibility that the Austrians have to check morale first if they assault me, and maybe I'll survive the gunfire and force them into that. So I'm going to just stay there, which means I'm pretty much done with movement, I think. I got a couple of cannons I got to position. I think I'm going to position some cannons down here just to try to threaten this stuff. It's kind of a dangerous situation, though. The cav can't really protect it that well. What is that slope? How does that thing affect movement? That's the question. And I've got to look at the new rules for that, which is flood dike. I'm not sure I see anything. Okay, charge. It's blocking. Yeah, it's blocking for charge. So attacks across the flood dike right into cannons, which might not seem like a great idea, but it actually might be, because if there's no infantry to support them, which there wouldn't be, it might go very, very poorly. But on the other hand, I feel like I need to throw something in the way to defend some of this big gap here that I've got to open up. And I just don't have room to throw. You know, maybe I can squeeze out another hex or so, or 2, but that's the best I can do. I was thinking of a while back and came back to mind. Minis. Get rid of a problem that I've been having here, which is, hey, I don't know what I'm running into. You know, I may not know the quality of the troops, although that is pretty apparent in most of the Brigade Series games, because the morale is like printed right on the front in a really clear way. This is one of the reasons the Labatt games make kind of sense, is that, oh look, you know, you can't tell what the hell you're hitting in terms of quality. You're going to have to remember by the flags, just like the commanders would have to. And of course, the problem with that is that the commanders who know best are just as clueless as the commanders who don't know, like, what I'm throwing into battle. It really becomes sort of a memory type thing. And that happens in minis too. How the unit is painted and whatever tells you something about what their quality is, and you kind of remember that. Also, there's usually very few units on the board in the minis games I've played. The group I played with, I think, played mainly at a brigade level or whatever. But one thing you can tell is how big the unit is, which is something everybody on the field can see. You don't have a, oops, there was only one figure left on that and I didn't notice, which is essentially what, one box on here is. Being able to see the number of figures that are represented on the field, I think is a real big advantage in terms of the minis games versus these kind of games. If you're sitting there playing for a while, straight through, the way I no longer do, I used to do that a lot, especially opposed. You get kind of used to what's facing what, but it's definitely nice to have that visual appearance anyway. I just seem to be really chatty because, I don't know, I'm struggling to actually do the things in the game because not only are the mechanical actions, the mental mechanical side of it, painful in terms of balancing and juggling and looking everything up and everything, and I'm finding it much, much worse than I seem to remember it ever being. But also just how do I launch this attack? How do I effect what I want to do in terms of maneuvering the right pieces and everything? Which should be the joy in wargaming, but for me, I'm a simple guy. I just want to grind a couple of forces together and trade shots. That finishes the 8 p.m. turn. 8:30, this is the last daylight turn. Bridge is going to be checked again on the French side. Some of the French cavalry covered. Some of it wasn't used, so I've still got a fair amount of capability to defend myself with cav in that center here. However, guns positioned, like I said, in a kind of risky position. We'll see what that all means. The artillery, the Austrian artillery, did a good job. They hit a gun here, they killed a guy here, didn't get Messina. I don't know who's in command of the army. I can pick any marshal. However, I don't know if the game tells me who the current marshals are. Let's see who I have on the field. First of all, are either of the aide-de-camp, Milton and Rapp, are not marshals. Messina certainly is by now. Davout should be. Nothing here. Lon would be, and Bessier would be. Whoever I promote, then I have to figure out who I'm promoting outside of them. I guess Messina's on hand, so I'll promote him. He's right with the commander. He's not a bad choice. He's only a 3, same as Napoleon in this. I might be better off with Lon or Bessier. What do I have Bessier rated at? Here, Bessier is a 1. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Lon is not on the board, as far as I know. No, Lon's on the board, Davout's not on the board. Yeah, so if I promote Lon, I can replace him with Rapp, the aide-de-camp. And I'll run him over this turn. And Lon will be in charge of the army, but I don't really want him. Man, I got to get that army headquarters out of where it is, because that's the place I have to step on in order to replace things. But yeah, Lon's in command of the army. I've replaced his special command with General Rapp, and we'll just go with that. Rapp's pretty good, and I think we're set there. I did my recoveries, and yeah, we're all good. really struggling right now with all of this. I think I'll probably run this video through the night, and not much more than that. The first one wore out my entire memory, so I don't know. Despite heavy losses on the Austrian First Corps, everything's continuing attacks. That'll become more in question as we enter the actual night. We might be fighting at night here. There's nothing that really prevents it. There's just a lot of things that make it less likely. But yeah, there's no fire combat anymore, which makes it awesome, except when you're charging guns or whatever. Artillery fire from the Austrians, most of it didn't do much. But here, where the army headquarters for the French is, took out the remaining infantry that's defending it, and took out Messina as well. So now Legrand is in command of the 4th Corps. We had made Lannes the army commander, I think. I hadn't really marked it, but he sure is now. Yeah, because we swapped an aide-de-camp in there. Which is okay, because there's really no structure here. An aide-de-camp could have taken command of that. An aide-de-camp could be given a command like what Lannes took over. He essentially is treated as an aide-de-camp here, so that works fine. But across the board elsewhere, yeah, we're having real trouble because of the casualties that the French are taking. Let's see, we lost Napoleon, obviously. We lost, I should have him marked there, but we lost Messina, Molitor over on Messina's corps. Not a lot of the Nansudi, not all that many of the divisional commanders. The Austrians are doing a whole lot better. Fresnel was killed or wounded, and that's it. Of course, when the midnight turn comes, we check to see if these are deaths, if they are okay enough for the next day, or if their situation is indeterminate. And there really should be little boxes or something to mark those different considerations. That didn't used to be how the game handled things. It was just, yeah, you're dead or you're not, if I recall correctly. Anyway, now we go on for the attacks, and you're looking at things, and it's like this Austrian First Corps really was in no position to make this attack to begin with, but it was attacking stuff that was in no position to receive it. And that ends up just being a muddied mess. Like normally, when you hit fresh troops against fresh troops, yeah, you might get some routes, but you don't have complete disintegration. Here, it looks like both sides are kind of disintegrating completely. And again, it's hard to tell, like those Jaegers. I know there's nothing left of them. I don't know. Oh, well, they're dead. All right. But yeah, it would be, again, obvious in a minis game. You only got one figure or two figures left in that command? What the hell? What's that doing at the front? But that's a lot harder to see with the board games. Now, I should be used to this by now, but somehow in this game, it's having a bigger impact because of the close combat situation being so predominant to the game. It doesn't make that much difference when you're just lining up units and trading shots. You're like, oh, that unit disintegrated. Well, it's time for a reserve to come in or to extend a line or something. But that doesn't work with the close combat because you're plowing into the hex. And that, of course, is one of the reasons I don't do that much close combat in the games that don't absolutely require it, is because it's not obvious to me what I'm facing, what I'm seeing. And honestly, through this game system, you're not actually supposed to be able to look at the casualty sheet, at how big the unit that remains is, which leaves it really up in the air. Now, here I have no choice but to close combat. So I do it, and I'm like, wow, that's interesting. The effects that it has with a more volatile, rambunctious, violent player under say CWB or something would have the same kind of results, where it's like, gosh, I didn't realize I was hitting nothing. Again, to the fog of war thing, just like with the blocks, I feel like there's too much fog of war in this game. A lot of people tend to say, oh, there's way too little. Players have way more information than any historical commander would have. Yeah, for the overall commander, but not so much for the person who's on the ground facing the actual decisions. Do I actually launch the attack, or do I stay in cover and give suppressing fire and kind of ignore the fact that my overall commander is giving me orders that he doesn't fully understand the situation? And that leads to a whole bunch of weird questions, because command and control and fog of war are intrinsically linked in a way that, like, bad decisions. So good commanders will neglect the right orders, and bad commanders will neglect the wrong ones, basically. Your local knowledge can be much, much greater than the person who's giving the overall commands. But on the other hand, the local commander might not know the overall strategy, which includes sacrificing his forces. So there's just this whole tangled spaghetti knot that, like, you can't really untangle and just say, oh, well, you shouldn't be able to see the enemy forces because as the overall commander, you wouldn't be able to see that. But the person making the actual decision on how hard to attack would. But on the other hand, how do you kind of appropriately randomize or model the fact that the local commander has initiative, and the initiative that they have may either spoil your plans or be good for them? It doesn't translate. It doesn't translate. There are going to be these holes no matter what you try to do in this kind of tactical situation. But yeah, I mean, clearly these guys know there's nothing there now, and as a player, I know there's nothing there now, but I didn't know that there were only 2 boxes left. I shouldn't have known that by the game system. But by any reasonable view of the situation, anyone who could see the unit would have been able to see that. And again, it's just, board war games don't capture some of the stuff the minis do that seems more appropriate. Being able to see how big the unit is, how beat up it is, that seems like a reasonable thing. Being able to know what the quality is doesn't. Trying to push through these woods is just a royal bitch. Especially with the skirmishers deployed in front, so they slow me down a little bit. It's beautiful how the system is handling that. It is really making it, so that there's no quick little, oh yeah, I can get attacks in or whatever. No, I'm advancing in, night's coming, and I'm going to have a hell of a time trying to break that line. But night is sort of a randomizer, and we'll see how it works here. But under the other system, if you were able to keep a night attack up, there was a reasonable chance, if you have good quality troops. Now, I don't. Some of them are, but this is like a D. If you have good quality troops, you have a chance of, like, fucking the enemy over really, really badly. Under the old system, the defender always had the advantage, which meant that night attacks tended to fail. But here, That's not so certain. Sometimes the defender has to check morale first, which means the night attack could throw a little bit more of a wrench in than it normally does. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Doing the slow process of moving everything. I got everything here, a couple of assaults up here. Now I've shifted over to this side. Then I'm going to take the center and figure out what's happening there. But you can see Essling's in a lot of trouble. I noticed I screwed up though, and that's why I pulled the video up. There was a 4 visibility last time. I'm screwing up left and right? I was using these artillery at beyond a range of 4. I don't know if they would have gone to 5. That would have made it probably pretty fuzzy. Like some of the shots probably were illegal, some of them not. But yeah, these guns can't fire now that it's too dark. I don't know what the hell's going on here. I got pieces all over the fucking place. This, I thought there was artillery in here. There wasn't. There's just skirmishers, which changes the rules. They get to retreat, but I don't know where they fucking get to retreat to. If they go into here, they disorder it, and that would fuck everything up. But that means this is going to be able to run through and hit those guns. I also wanted to point, other than my mistake in trying to figure out how to resolve it, I wanted to point out the skirmishers' effectiveness here in the woods, because they don't get a penalty. Nothing gets a penalty for firing in the woods. The idea being, if you've got a line of sight, the woods are pretty nasty. Essig has been pretty clear on this in all of his designs. It's like, yeah, units don't hide a little bit into the woods for the protective value. And they might to cover, so you can't see where they are. But units didn't deploy a little into the woods because they had some sort of defensive value, which a lot of games seem to give. And some of the arguments for that is you couldn't maintain your formation, but also with artillery fire, you're facing splintering just like you would on a ship, where you might actually be getting worse results for the infantry deployed there. Basically, you'd either deploy deep enough into the woods that you weren't engaged unless you got into a close firefight. When you got into those close firefights, they tended to be bloody as hell, so you didn't want to give a defensive bonus for them. He wanted to resolve them as, the kind of close combat firepower that they really represented. Or they deployed in front of the woods where they could have a formation and mass their fire. But the skirmishers, the net effect of this rule is that the skirmisher fire, which is the only fire that happens here, other than an occasional gun, there's like an artillery piece somewhere, ends up, being as effective as it would in the clear, and the enemy can't advance as quickly. The woods cost them more to move. The skirmishers placed in front cost them yet more because they have to close combat the skirmishers and then they fade away. And so it's really, really a painful situation facing, a skirmisher deployment in the woods like this. But this is just going to be a fucking mess. And you can see the mess that's happening around Essling as well. With the second and fourth corps not hitting it, but getting into position to do so, where they've got it basically surrounded and will be hitting from rear positions, and there's really nothing that Lon can do about this. He's surrounded and fucked. I think this is going to be the end of the Empire here. The retreat would have been presumably into the brickyard, but also it could have been into here. But they have the option to stand, and I'm going to try to stand because I don't want to lose my guns. Not that they're guaranteed to be lost, but really terrible things happen if this line collapses as completely as it would under this attack. Results of standing aren't that bad. Skirmishers don't take stragglers. So I ended up taking a single casualty result. If I had been worse morale, I wouldn't have even taken that, like normal skirmishers. But these try to stand. I take a single casualty result. I'm going to rout out of there. The army's gone. But it does protect the internals, which any kind of retreat, even into the brickyard, wouldn't have done for me. I also caused a couple of stragglers on the, let's see, I did mark them, on the attacking unit. So in a sense, I kind of got a reasonable result out of it and slowed them down a little, which I can't be too unhappy about. What a mess this system is in terms of like giving widely variant results. The Austrian attack here with disordered troops. Well, I'm hitting one of them broken French units, just like I was here, and they had to check morale first. They needed a 5 or 6 to survive. They did. The Austrians have almost no chance, even though they're a AAA size. It's 2 units. I have an A unit on top, but it's wrecked now after having marched into those guns. It's all disordered. It basically also needed either a 5 and a 6 or a 6 to survive. It did not. So that means we go to the the chance of the French standing was low, but given that they did, the chance of the Austrians standing is also very low. And then the results on the combat table are really nasty. The French are taking just a straggler, but the Austrians are getting wiped out. 3-4, and of course they rout. There's the freeze frame or whatever of the position. At the end of the Austrian turn, oh boy. And yeah, I mean, so fucking painful to resolve everything. I am wiped out. I feel like, I've played a big turn. And I have for this game, but I feel like I've played a big turn in something like the Leipzig or something where I'm moving all over the place and everything. Just the amount of mental commitment to handling 2 combats. That's it. It really threw me for a loop. What you see is there's almost nothing left of the Austrian attack. This unit made it to where it did, but First Corps is not going to be in good shape. Sixth Corps, I need to change their orders. They should be going up and covering Aspern or something, because nothing good is going to come of what they're up to. And I need that extra force up here. Essling may be in a lot of trouble. Or maybe not. Who knows? Positional advantage is weird. It doesn't affect when you check morale, which feels a little odd to me. Like, height does, but hey, I'm being attacked in the ass. Maybe I don't have to check to stand, maybe I don't have to make a check because you'll fail because I'm bigger or something along those lines. Of course, the fact that it's in a village means I don't have to check anyway, so it doesn't matter. It will affect the morale check, I think. God, I don't know. Yeah, attacked in rear is a -2. So, except I don't have to make a morale check. I'm either beaten or not. And it kind of makes sense. You'd be dispersed in the village and whatnot. But yeah. Trying to get... Oops, I don't think I checked this guy to see if he recovered. I did the other cav that I know of. Just the amount of burden that there is mentally in this game is just so fucking heavy compared to what the old version used to be. Now, the old version didn't do Napoleonic combat right, but I think the issue is trying to do Napoleonic combat right at this level of detail with the concepts that this game has is not a trivial thing at all. And that's why, Wellington's victory hurts me, why Labatt hurts me. It's the nature of the amount of shit you have to hold in your head in it. Now, I remember the Napoleonic minis I played being pretty fucking light, lighter than version 2. Did they feel right? Yeah, you know, I don't know. They weren't that bad. Basically, throw a chip pull in. Cav didn't work right, if I recall correctly. They basically came up through chip pull instead of anything else, which really doesn't, it doesn't reflect things properly, but it may be an abstraction that's worth doing for simplicity. Anyway, chattering so much about minis, I figured I'd bring up the one thing that I really didn't like about minis games, which was no pre-measuring being sort of the general feeling throughout most minis groups. What that, you know, there's all kinds of different skills that one acquires in gaming, and that one just didn't feel like, as a commander, especially, you know, at the field command level, as opposed to, at the army command or whatever, as opposed to in a small unit, being able to make that decision of, hey, are they in range, or am I wasting my first shot or whatever, which is often an important thing because everybody's armed and nobody's had to reload, and problems come up in reloading and whatnot. Sometimes with naval engagements, it's especially important because they heavier pack the guns or something for that first shot. But anyway, it's going to be less ragged fire. It's going to be more advantageous. I'm not talking about, sometimes it doesn't matter. Hey, am I within range? No, I'm not. Well, okay, I didn't really lose anything. But sometimes when you declare a fire is of importance. And sometimes it's like, well, I want to be within this range and this range. And, your ability to eyeball inches or whatever in this weird sort of circumstance is a skill that's obtained. Just like certain other tactical skills, to me, it felt wrong at the level of command that I was at. It's like, yeah, I should be basically, this shouldn't be something that's part of the game's mechanism. It shouldn't be something that penalizes my capability to play the game. But, you can make arguments either way. It is a skill. It is something that you learn. It makes your command a better and more effective and more efficient in combat than it would be otherwise. That might just all be figured in. You as a commander are better because you have that eyeballing skill. It's kind of like the hidden trackable information or something like that. And one argument can be, well, I'm not good at it, so it sucks. Well, you wouldn't notice the problem if you're good at it, right? Except that you notice other people have that issue. And you're like, well, you're not exactly fighting the battle, because the commander on the field who would be making these decisions tactically and down to the sergeant majors and whatnot, and their quality, that's all represented in the game already in some way. So you feel like, well, it shouldn't be up to me. But, shake it out however you will. I just never liked it. I wasn't particularly good at it. I had some really horrible situations. I also tended to play with, the group that I played with was kind of a weird group. So because I was newer, if I measured something, somebody else would come and remeasure it, whereas someone else is like, they just, oh yeah, that's within an inch, and I'm like, whoa. And it just, and I would call them out sometimes on it, because after I got burned by it, and, half the time they'd be wrong too. It's just, but I felt kind of bad about doing it. These were older guys and whatever, but, you know, when they're picking on me about it, I'm going to pick on them about it. And it just, nobody seemed happy, you know. Everybody would be unhappy when they failed at that. So, you know, in terms of happiness and enjoyment of the game, why would you impose something like that? I don't know. Because some people got very, very happy when their enemy failed, you know, and they'd be cackling maniacally about it. Up here for the French side of the turn. The bridge remains open for just one turn. We got a tide roll. So, well, the reason I'm back up is I kind of can't find anything to do with myself. I'm watching videos online. I don't have enough energy in my game to pursue my goals there as much as I'd like to. So I'm on a little bit of a sabbatical from that, and I don't want to open up the other account ever again if I can help it. But also, I got a whole backlog of stuff that's not really a backlog, but I have a huge backlog of stuff, but I have a whole bunch of stuff that's due to arrive that are like, I got like a play test, I've got a couple of previews and stuff like that, a review game, just a bunch of stuff coming. One that I asked for, the rest largely sought me out. And, you know, I got to get this out of the way. Kind of wanted to get Conquistadors done in between. I don't think that's going to happen. I'm worried I may not even get through all of this. French situation looks grim. However, we can see there aren't many Austrians here, so if I can, I'm going to try to do something about those Austrians there, but it's not trivial. It's not at all trivial because I just don't have the force there, and these guys feel like they're needed. We're hoping to launch waves of Cav into this. We're actually hoping to just break through on the first hit, but that didn't work. The waves aren't going to work because I sent my leader. I had to send my leader because this unit was not in command control to launch the charge. So I sent my leader with another unit, charged in, but now where he blew back to, because of the line of sight requirements, I can't move to here and charge. Evening makes it harder to coordinate these cav charges. I do have other cav I can throw into this, and this is a heavy. I probably don't want to use it against infantry. But now that this unit is disordered, my chances of breaking into it and hacking it apart are good. And also, it provides screen so that I can hit the cannons after I hit it, which might be even more impressive and important. I'm not sure. Once I clear that unit out of there, once it routes, the cannons will have clear shots on me when I'm coming in. So it's like I have to make some difficult decisions based on, do I want to hack up infantry or do I want to push further in and try to capture guns. Capturing guns isn't easy, though. Another result I didn't think of. I could end up with a break-off or a repulse, which is how I degraded their morale. The first time was a repulse. This time it's a break-off. No losses for the French, but now that free shot is not there, and I'm not going to get the artillery. I'm not going to get the chance to butcher the infantry or the artillery. Kev is turning into a mess back here. So yeah, now I'm not really sure quite how to proceed. Results on our cav in this location. Clear hex. Sent some light cav over there. Ended up getting a victory, hitting it from behind. Yes, it formed a square, so guess it had all around facing. That didn't actually matter. But it was already shaken, not a great unit. And just butchered the hell out of it. The units on the recharge pile captured a couple of limbered guns. Cav against limbered guns is great. Cav against unlimbered guns, if you can get them from behind, is fine. Straight on, though, I mean, I've got that option. I could throw these heavy cav in. But I did wreck that light cav. It took one loss. It only had one box left. It had been in combat before. And I also had to use another cav to drive the Austrian cav away, to get my way in there. But now that I've got a clear path, if any of this is in decent terrain, but I think it's all shit. Woods, I'm sure, blocks, right? Yeah. And the others are village, which will also block. So we got no real place where we can affect our cav to try to save what had been Lannes' corps. He's commander of La Grande Armée right now. We'll see if that changes. But yeah, and hey, we got a bloodlust off the cav versus cav fight. Not gonna last, but fair comparison in terms of effort is each hex in which there's a close combat here, especially the cav charges, is about the same level of effort as La Grande Guerre, or 1914 I'd say is a little lighter. Just in terms of like doing a single hex of combat in La Grande Guerre. By the way, the toilet up here works fine. The toilet down the basement works fine. It's just mine, which leads me to think that I ought to just replace the regulator. But it may be getting clogged by stuff from the pipe. Yeah, I know. I had to at least pull it out and see if I can clean it. The just the amount of, these different lookups and everything seems at about that same level. That's a really heavy level of combat. I love La Grande Guerre. Usually there's like 3 or 4 attacks on the front. One of which qualifies at the level I'm talking about, because minor attacks don't really matter. It's the big offensives, where the offensive is centered, is the one place where this really kind of equates. And with those, I'm used to this. You pull the units off the board, you line them up, and you resolve this whole kind of fight, and it's sort of almost like a mini board type thing. Here, I'm trying to do it in situ. And I think that's kind of the problem. I'm used to something much, much lighter. Now, I'm used to something much, much lighter in my grand strategic games, too. So I don't know quite how to say it. It's just that, like, the effort seems like a greater tax here. Plus, there could be attacks all along the line during the course of a turn. There's nothing... It doesn't tend to happen. It tends to be a couple of hexes per turn. But it makes each player turn the kind of weight that the player turns are in La Grande Guerre. And somehow that too is unacceptable. This is a tactical game. It shouldn't be, I shouldn't be expending that much effort. I don't mind walking away and saying, well, at least I got a month done. Here I'm like, shit, I got half of a 30-minute turn done. The interactive nature. I know what I've done. I know where I'm in. I'm in the movement phase. I know I've done some cav, but I'm kind of lost now. Well, what was I going to do next? I don't think there's much I can do to save this, or here, to tell you the truth. I've been delaying making the decision whether I can't charge in here. I don't have a good enough unit. Although, I wouldn't have to check morale. Because but I'd have to undergo the fire combat, and that's no good. But I have to undergo the fire combat anyway. Yeah, shut up, man. Cut around this way. The firepower did a morale loss to me, and now I'm attacking from this hex into that hex, and that works. That works. Reduce my fire combat lets me put a big enough unit in there that I, even if I took casualties, I would have been okay. But the fact that I was coming in the flank meant that the two guns at range 1 were both firing on the one chart. I ended up getting 2M-1s. They don't accumulate, if I'm remembering correctly. So I'm just shaking. It's not going to make a hell of a lot of difference. I had to look that up, though. Another cost. There's so much I have to look up now. Just weird little things that don't accumulate as part of your pattern of remembered knowledge of the game. It's just really, really easy to forget all the little dinger-dingers. Well, I had to check. I thought there was some prohibition on melee combat, whether you could attack when wrecked. I'm pretty sure you could do it when disordered, since I wasn't when I entered the hex. Not sure if I could, well, I wouldn't have many movement points, so disorder, and it's stupid. But yeah, you can close combat in any state, which means I have a shot at taking those guns. But again, another lookup. Just constantly having to look these things up. They're not sticking in my head. I don't know why. I think I'm just getting stupider with age. And genuinely fatigued again at the end of this. You know, it's a small game compared to the Viva Emperor Leipzig one I was doing. But it is wiping me out on each fucking turn that there's actual activity taking place. When nothing's happening, it's easy, you know. And there's long periods when nothing's happening. But when it gets down to it, the down to it is really dirty. Why are you off here? You think this guy got bumped? Yeah, there we go. Making messes out of everybody. I've gotten clumsy as well as stupid. Yeah, some of the cav has recovered, but not a hell of a lot, as you can see. I have to have the leaders off the blown cav so that I know that they're there. This was successful, of course, and recovered everywhere I can. Essling, I gotta hope the Austrians fail their night checks and decide to go and, you know, give up the assault. The most likely assault to end is this one, though. That I think ends on an 8 or less at this point. Okay, so here we are on the Austrian side. First night turn, 9 p.m. I rolled corps attack stoppage checks. Not surprisingly, first corps is stopping, but unfortunately, so is second. Second was leading the assault over here. I gotta make decisions. I think I'm gonna call 6th Corps off completely. I think they are also going to do an emergency withdrawal. Well, they could actually just halt. They could call a halt and fall back. They've been processing long enough, and I don't mind that. The big question is, do I want 4th Corps to try to take advantage of the position they have? They have some rear positioning. They could just take Essling, and I think I'm going to try to go through with that, much as I don't want to actually do the mechanical aspect of it. But yeah, this is going to take the pressure off the French, and both sides will get to start recuperating overnight, and we'll see what that all brings. So these guys all pulled back. We got a few attacks, including on the granary there. See if we can break the French with an attack here. We mostly hold Aspern. I'm not expecting to lose that overnight. I'm able to stay within range. Basically, the commander has to be 8 hexes from the corps headquarters, the divisional commander. Therefore, you know, I kept my division, my corps commands close enough to the front that, like, running away wouldn't, you know, the minimum runaway distance is 6 hexes. So the forces didn't really have to flee that far. They took some attrition losses, stragglers, whatever. This should be blue by now. I just make them red to remind me that I got to check the stragglers. But yeah, a couple of attacks in here. I don't think there are any cannons present, so we'll just go right into them and see what night fighting in the town looks like. I want to show you how I have to deal to cope with the close combat table. I identify the units. So this unit is in this hex attacking these guys. I have to find the units that are present. If there's more than one, it complicates the whole thing. I make the check to stand, or checks to stand, to determine who won, what the situation is in the combat. But then I have to check the unit numbers again, and I should have done this, just once. And then I mark them by putting the pencil at their location. Now, again, if I have more than one, I might have to use more than one pointer at them. But so in this case, the 3 light 4-4 is an A morale. It's going to be taking the defender's losses up here, whereas the 22-2-4 is the C morale. It's going to be taking the attacker losses. I roll the dice. I like to correspond the dice to who's doing the damage, so blue is going to be on the attacker's losses chart to indicate that the Austrians are losing that. It might be a little confusing, but it makes sense to me. I roll them. Now I check these. Okay, do I have a size AA unit? No, not at all. But it is night, so it's -2, and it's A morale. Wait, no, that's this. So I'm at 3, hold on, night is -2, the attacker's not in line. So -2 gets me to that result. That's my temporary result because, well, it's good enough. That's what's going to get suffered, is a 1-3. And I can write that down whenever I like. But let's take a look at the other one. The other one was, now I've got it pointing, I think, at the 22-2-4, but I got to check again because a pencil doesn't seem all that useful. So that's a C morale, and you can't count on the counters in this. That got a night -2. Is it an AA size? No. So that got a 0-1. So these results stand. So the French will take 1 casualty and 3 stragglers. The Austrians will take 1 straggler. The French will rout out of there. And the Austrians have taken the hex. They could continue on, but there isn't anywhere for them to continue. That's one of these 3 attacks that I did. Done more quickly and more sensibly than I tend to do it, because usually the echoes in my head are giving me problems as I transfer back and forth between each of these things in a way that when I'm explaining it out loud doesn't happen. Out of shaken, disordered counters, but I'm going to take one off from where it's not going to matter, because these are going to recover at the end of the turn because I had a route through here. Now, this was a highly unlikely result for a C unit at night to make this successful attack, but it wasn't ridiculous. I believe it came out to a 5 or a 6 because a C comes out to 3. Night is -2. It may have come out to a 6 because it's attacking a line in a town or village. That was the line. And I got the 6. But you always have a 1 in 6 chance of succeeding when you attack in a village. I don't care what it is, it could be a single box of an E morale unit can march in and just win, no matter what, because there's nothing like the normal close combat procedure where both sides have to check morale. You immediately break them. I don't care what you are. You could be a guy with a pitchfork. You scare the entire unit away. I mean, that's ridiculous because like a skirmisher can't attack in melee and stuff like that. But essentially, very, very small force can knock out the Imperial Guards out of your, what's the chateau at Waterloo? I don't remember. I pretend that I should remember. I know that it's a chateau. I don't remember the name. I would never remember the name except if it's on the map in front of me. But you see what I mean. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that even stupid attacks like I just made here can be fruitful. And you can say that's a good thing or a bad thing. For me, the luck factor on this, that 1 in 6 chance of automatic success attacking into a village, that feels beyond. I like a lot of luck in my games, but that feels beyond the luck that I can accept. If you dropped it to 1 in 10, maybe, you know. But yeah, it's just, you know, there would have been a chance under the old system, unless the unit had ridiculous morale, that you would push it out of the town. But in this system, it's just automatic. And I just feel like that doesn't quite work right. Attacking the village at night is just harder than during the day because you have to succeed in your morale check at -2, which is why the 6 was the case. Here we failed, but the penalties for fighting at night aren't so bad. There's a big negative to the casualty rate, to the casualty die roll, so the costs of losing aren't that bad. Going into the fortified terrain is very different. Those are not treated as villages for combat in any sense, even though they are as for movement. So what that meant is the Austrians have to check first because one of the first things, in fact, yeah, one of the first things on the first thing really on the cases for the checking order is if the defender is in fortified terrain, they do not have to check first. And not great, but they stood, which means the French had to check as well. The French have a very, very good chance, even though they're being attacked in the flank and they're outnumbered and everything. They get the bonus for the fortified terrain, but it's still night, so it's possible the confusion and everything might cause them to run away. They ended up sticking around. They needed a 2. It would be possible a better unit or a leader there, or not such a small force, would have automatically stood. And then it goes to the firefight table, and the firefight table has a -2 for night, and another -2 for the defender in the fortified terrain. So there was, you know, almost no chance of doing any damage to the French. The Austrians took a hit, which means I have to make a leader loss check, which is fine. And now I go to the mechanical side of things. None of these blues are active this turn in the sense that I'm not going to be making any straggler recoveries. I'm going to have a pain in the butt because these units have to form up. And so where they recover is going to be kind of painful. I really liked the old system where you mark units with straggler recovery at the beginning of the turn, and if they still got it at the end, you deal with it. Here, I mean, you could do that, but the countermix for the newer, the Talavera-based games don't have the straggler recovery markers. They got rid of that phase, and so it's kind of a, well, did you move this unit or not? You know, was it eligible at the beginning of the turn, and is it still eligible? Is basically the 2 questions you have to ask. And without a marker to remind you, it's just, again, more mental burden that's been added in a game that has added way too much. And in that case, I think it was to reduce countermix, but they changed the rules to reduce countermix, essentially. And it's the same effect, it's just, it's all determined at the end of the turn. And also there's, you know, it's twice as many straggler recovery turns in the game, although night is, it's modified, and because the charts are different, you'd have to do some kind of calculation to see, is the straggler recovery as good at night as it used to be? But does that matter? You know, the new designers may have decided the numbers that you were getting originally were wrong anyway. So I just try to put my trust in the new system, but because they got a lot of other things much righter. Anyway, to my mechanical stuff, I babble in order to avoid doing things. All right, French side of the 9 p.m. turn, first night turn. The bridge is going to remain open for a while. Austria pretty much knows it's going to be open. And obviously France knows just how long it's going to be open, which that's not accurate, but what do you do, you know, unless you have a GM or something. Massena's corps, now under Legrand, I guess, is, it succeeded in repulsing the Austrian attack, so everything over there, it's time to start thinking about, you know, once I recover a little bit, what am I going to do? I have at least one division under Saint-Cyr that's in good shape, might be able to lead an assault into Aspern. Otherwise, though, Lan's little subdivision there, which is now, what, Raps? So many casualties, starting with the Emperor himself. They're still under a siege-type situation, but it looks pretty clear with the withdrawal of the Second Corps that we're going to hold. Note that line extensions don't have to be facing the exact same way. So this guy's facing this way, the line extension's facing this way. Which can be kind of weird. They put out some special vanity counters or whatever that were really, really helpful for the CWB stuff. I used to import them in. Not really necessary, but they show different directions. That may be what the weird sort of column extensions that I had somewhere are the equivalent of, because you can't extend columns. Anything else I want to highlight as I try to understand the game myself? The situation. Not much. It's a night turn, you know. For the most part, night turns, nothing happens, but something's still happening. Weird going on. I've got a straggler mark here in kind of the middle of the unit. I don't know what the hell that's from. This is on Saint-Cyr, so chances are this is a leftover that just didn't get erased from the last time I played because I reused the sheets. Because it doesn't make any sense where it is. Putting this where it belongs. Keeps falling off. Oh, so that's the end of that. Not much happened. Although there, you know, it's just, the system feels too difficult to me now. You know, even little things like nothing really happened this turn, but the straggler recovery I've already talked about, but all kinds of little cav units. This is not a game I played very much. I played both Austerlitz and Marengo more. This was sort of the last one that came out under the original pile, and it, I don't know, it just didn't attract me in the same way. And you know, also the later something came out, the less times I played it, the less, you know, I felt real connection with it. And then when the version 3 came out, I think I played it again, maybe, well, since my version 3 sheets are marked, obviously I did, probably just before I started videoing, sometime, you know, within a year or two of that. It's astounding how long I've been doing the videos, honestly. And so it maybe got like 2 or 3 plays, and that's about it. And it certainly got at least 2, maybe 3. And I don't know how I feel. You know, it's one where things are just, you have this really heavy reliance on cav for the defense for the French, and that's just a weird situation where they're, you know, flinging cav at the enemy hoping it'll stick or whatever, because it's such a crapshoot, especially under this version. I don't remember if it was this bad under the old, but when you get to the Cavalries, when you get to all the different, funky shit that's really the heart of Napoleonic combat, I start not being as linked to things. So, I can get away with not using a hell of a lot of cav functionality at Austerlitz, or for that matter at Marengo. But here, it is one of the French's main capabilities, and you cannot ignore it. You cannot. The skirmishers are another in this, at least in this version. I don't know. I don't remember them being as impressive in the other. In the other, they were just extra firepower that was out there that was harder to hit. Here, they're pretty much the only way you can get that extra firepower. So, just as always, hey, I'm done with a turn. It's time for me to go downstairs. I'm pretty much worn out in terms of resources for my video games, so I'm like not been playing that as much, but I'm still not coming up here very often. In fact, the little bit of time that I was playing on my wife's machine for an extra account, that week or two or whatever, I don't know how long it lasted. It had to be more than 2 weeks, because you get your hero after 4 weeks. So, but that amount of time, I think I've gotten them. Maybe I haven't even gotten them. But that amount of time that I played on there was simply a means to come up here more often while I was, actually fairly addicted to the game in a lot of ways. Spending more time on it, certainly. But it doesn't equate to me coming up here more often to not be that addicted. And, now I'm kind of at a loss as to what to do or whatever, but it's hard for me to come up and play. And it's not like I don't have things I need to do. I just am not going to do those, so I end up wasting my time in some other fashion. Okay, starting the Austrian turn. What happened? So I wrote some orders for First Corps to defend Aspern. I'm going to take that a little bit more liberally than like default defense, whatever that means. And trying to find a sweet spot where, and maybe I'll just pull out the old defensive orders and tweak them a little bit at some point. But I'm just so upset by what not being able to use them has done to my play and my enjoyment of the system. Although still, I think the biggest problem has to do with a combination of my aging and the system getting more and more burdensome in this version. But I seem to enjoy it, what was it, 15 years ago or whatever, when version 3 came out. So in addition to that, we've got an attack failure here for 4th Corps. That includes the Advanced Guard. As far as I'm concerned, they're part of 4th Corps according to the organization. So it's all going to fall back. Unfortunately, Charles has to run back to the army because he's talking to Bellegarde. I may send Hiller up to go have a chat with him. Hey, what do I do, man? Because whatever his goal was here isn't going to work anymore, and I feel like I need to reposition somewhere. The problem is there's no good places to approach. This is ugly terrain, as we saw, especially when facing the skirmishers. Straight from Aspern is not that bad. That's not a bad launching point, but if I'm defending Aspern, it may be hard to use. Otherwise, then there's across the dike or in range of the Lobau guns. So it may be that the Austrians are going to throw themselves onto the defensive anyhow at this point. which would be historical, but I feel like the Charles's confidence, kind of releases me from that problem. I don't remember what his lack of confidence had as an effect. Maybe I should look that up. Meanwhile, I went out for a walk, not a very long one. Went to go see the sheep, and there we are. And they weren't there, but there's some new, off that way, some new construction that's planned. They rezoning a bunch of territory that was, I don't know, some kind of weird commercial, which maybe it was for logging or something. I have no idea. To light residential. And it's kind of interesting. It's just part of the woods around me, but one of the advantages is the woods that are right near me, on this side at least, behind me. That stuff down that way, which probably it looks like it's too bright in the camera, but those trees, that whole section could actually go. It's not part of this, but yeah. Anyway, I'm way out of shape, and it was hard to deal with the walk anyhow, just emotionally. But anyway, what are we looking at? Whenever our rec division reaches 7 or more, Charles does the emergency retreat. Yeah, so we weren't there, but that would really hinder his willingness to pursue sort of an all-out attack or even defense. So at least now I have a better defensive stance. All right, enough chatter, I guess. Just so hard to convince myself to actually get around to moving the pieces. And I don't know why. I mean, it's almost like I'm just bored of playing war games and want to do other things. So I think that's the end of the Austrian side of the turn. French side, that's the Imperial Guard. There may be more coming in on top of it or underneath it. But yeah, the bridge is open, so they'll be able to come up. You think the concept of the French having to lose the bridgehead is, pure fantasy at this point. I can't see the Austrians launching a successful enough attack to push the French back to capture the bridge and cause problems there. Which means the Austrians ought to be trying to figure out how they're going to defend themselves. And in order to do that, 2nd Corps Commander and 6th Corps Commander are working their way towards Charles. Hohenlohe, 2nd Corps, is already with him. He'll get some kind of orders. But it's kind of hard. There's no great defensive position anywhere. If I had taken Essling, that would be fine. Aspern is going to have to be the center of it, and then that raises a question, what's up with, I can't really expose. There's points for the French up here, points for both of us here, and then the richest points are up there. That's a 3-point swing on each of them. So obviously, trying to hold a line here makes sense, but I think I have to kind of curve it over. I may give up Gross-Enzdorf, Enzersdorf, because I just can't see trying to contain the entire French force. I could calculate out the victory points and see what that would mean, but the truth of the matter is I don't know what the casualty points are, etc. So there we have it. It is a tedious function, going through lookup by lookup to see what unit is and whether or not it's able to recover stragglers or move, in order to cope with the lack of the straggler recovery counters, which again I could pull out and use. I'm making the straggler recovery rolls during the movement phase. It doesn't matter during the night, but I probably won't be able to do that once real fighting starts happening. But to some extent, when you do an emergency withdrawal or whatever, your command ends up often not correctly positioned, and you need to move some units. In some cases, like these guys, ass hanging out for the French to take advantage of. But you know, it's a night turn. I want to recover. So the units that are shaken or in bad morale state, those units are going to continue moving and form up and, you know, do the more reasonable things. And this is not specific to 3.0. This is to the game system as a whole. The fact that recovery can't happen when you've got a different morale state than normal. So the units that are, you know, disorganized or whatever, they're going to probably move around and try to find a camping spot that's better. Whereas units that are in perfectly fine condition, except they've lost some stragglers, they're just going to throw their packs down and take a nap right where they are without regard. Yeah, it feels a little weird, but yeah, there's a lot that feels weird when you start looking too closely at a game. About ready to start the French turn. Unfortunately, I ordered something kind of a rarity, not a very pretty game or anything, that I really wanted and was kind of excited, and it arrived today. And I opened it up, and the seller had misidentified it and sent me something completely different. Something I have absolutely no fucking interest in. But a Napoleonic game with a similar name, but they had it mislabeled over on BGG, and I don't know how that's going to resolve. I mean, I'm not out that much money no matter what, but it just sucks. So I was kind of excited. On to the French turn, we have a random event, advanced reinforcements. Well, this whole clump of reinforcements coming in, normally it would push the next reinforcements up a turn. However, because there's reinforcements this turn, they're allowed to force march. The special rules of this particular scenario would make, like, if it was next turn's reinforcements came in a turn later, that wouldn't help. They'd just be milling around, not able to cross the bridge to Lobau as opposed to the bridge from it. And it would do me no good at all, but at least I've got something. Don't know what's going on. I don't really have any orders anywhere. Not sure if who's in command, Lon, has anything he wants to issue. It's conceivable that I might want to at least rearrange Massena's old corps, which is now, I think, under Legrand. We're just losing leaders left and right. To put the focus of it up here, which would be Saint-Cyr's command. However, a lot of straggler recovery to do, and repositioning things would cost me the straggler recovery and might be a worse choice. So I probably will do nothing because, well, that's easier anyway. Yeah, I had to get this replaced. Turned out kind of fortunate because it meant I could actually bring everybody and get them moving across the bridge. If I don't get them onto the board, they count as clogging up next turn's reinforcements. So you might end up seeing some weird deployments where troops are like, you know, spilling out like this cav here. Just trying to make some additional room so that the next, so that the bridge can be used. I changed my mind. St. Cyr hasn't faced any fire, so he didn't have any stragglers, so I'm moving him. And who is it? One of these has almost nothing left. Molitor has only 2 units left. I didn't move either of these. Legrand, no, Legrand's all there. Molitor has only 2 units on the board. So I'm kind of figuring, well, there's not enough to really reinforce. And, you know, if the Austrians want to come back, I got the Imperial Guard to throw in. How the Guard is going to be commanded now is a little weird. Because under the original rules, It's directly under Napoleon's control. They don't belong to a corps. Apparently they have an order acceptance. I don't know where it's issued to. There's not an individual commander of the Guard. There's no command headquarters. Yeah, I just don't know. Maybe I issue them to the Army Command, but that doesn't make sense. They wouldn't be tied to it. Maybe I issue them as divisional commands, but I can extend it. I don't know. I'll make up some shit, but yeah, that's not really well covered here. So they've got to achieve some sort of orders. I guess that's it. I'm just having so much trouble, motivating to come up and play. Okay, well, Austrian turn, not much happens. Again, it's nighttime, just recovering. And Second Corps is almost entirely, I believe is entirely recovered at this point. Fourth Corps is getting there. Oh wait, no, there's a Second Corps. I wonder if I rolled for them. 2122. Is that this guy? Because I rolled for this guy. Where's 2122? Yeah, I rolled for him because he didn't move back. Okay. Maybe it's Fourth Corps that's done. No, Fourth Corps has significant hits on it as well. Yeah, I thought I was completely fixed with Second Corps because they barely engaged. They marched up. This unit got things kind of confused. It was sitting up here. It shouldn't have been there. It's a French unit that routed up this way. It's trying to find its way back to its lines. And it will continue that process because you're only allowed to retreat 6 X's on a turn. That puts it on to the French turn. This is the 11 p.m. turn, so after the French go on this, and yeah, I'm not capable of doing that right away. Even though there's nothing going on, there's still the tedium of all the straggler checks, and somehow just the burden is heavier on me right now. Even though, so yeah, one thing I kind of maybe have to decide is, hey, what happens if Napoleon dies? Does that impact my need to play the second day? The biggest question there being, would the French army stand? I'm not sure. I really don't know. It's such a what if that it's the kind of thing that maybe you throw a die for or something, or you just decide, well, screw it, man. This is the battle we're signed up for. Great leaders have died before in battle, and the armies continued fighting. But you almost feel like some kind of impact would come across if it was found out that not just Napoleon was so wounded he had to be taken from the field, which should have had an impact anyway. Like, that should have an impact the level of, like, the guard breaking should have. But if he's actually dead, that would just, I think, have a humongous effect on the French command. Not the same level, like, say, if Archduke Charles died. First of all, most of his sub-commanders didn't like him, so, But you would have just, honestly, I think you would have chaos in the French army in terms of the Marshals and whatnot. Maybe there's an acceptance of Lannes at this moment, but if Napoleon's dead, it becomes this interesting whole political thing where it's like, what are we doing? Are we here? Should a marshal be running back to France to try to seize power or something? I really don't know. Or is it like the Roman armies? Would it end up like that, where the person who's in command of the armies would be the person you want there? But honestly, what would happen? Would Lannes arrest Bessier or Berthier? Who is it here? is Bessier. Would he arrest Bessier because he's been pissed at him? And like, these marshals would have potentially the possibility of seizing power. A great victory here with one marshal definitely in command might be a huge thing. But if you're not in command, if the decision was made that Lannes in command, well, who made that decision? Well, Massena's not here. He's wounded too, so that's not a problem. So the only two people we have on the field right now who have any chance of any kind of power position are Lannes and Bessier. Davout is on his way. Would he show up? He finds out Napoleon's dead. Gosh, maybe I should fall back. And to me, it becomes this chaotic situation that, like, you could do so many different things with, right? I think the idea of this campaign continuing anything like Napoleon envisioned it is out the window. And then the question is there a reason for the French to be here on this side of the river, exposed? So maybe we just hope that Napoleon lives, because if he doesn't, I really don't know that the battle would unfold in anything like a reasonable fashion. In terms of victory conditions, they tell you something. Like, there's, I think, a huge the Emperor is killed. Shift the victory won in favor of the Austrians. Yeah, I don't buy that. I don't buy that at all. Like, I really am very uncertain. I feel like even if it doesn't turn out to be a rout of the French army, even if they hold their position, that the political machinations between the Marshals and what would happen, it just would not play out in the same way. It's almost like in every case, I feel like there would be die rolls. Like the Bessier land thing, Lannes is already pissed at Bessier and vice versa. And what would that do? Would they continue to fight on the same way? Maybe. Or would there be some sort of dispute? And what would be the result of that? And then the Davout situation, showing up at a battle where the emperor's already been lost and where there's just no way that campaign's going to go forward. Man, that doesn't make sense. What does? Well, lots of different things. But again, I could see maybe rolling a die and seeing, does he show up? I would buy that the guard comes on. I'm not sure that they're willing to fight, though. I mean, they may be planning on taking Napoleon back in state, and just withdraw from the field. There's just so many crazy permutations that would come from Napoleon actually being killed in the battlefield. And why? Well, it's because the stupid army headquarters needing orders now. Okay, came up here to try to squeeze a half turn in because I have this sort of rule. Try to get a turn in or some play in every day. Yeah, I woke up so fucking late, and this is Friday, I gotta go dancing, so. So I roll for random events and I get one, and oh boy, this is going to be a painful one. Artillery accident. Randomly select one of the player's batteries. This is the hard part. I have the batteries all listed here, but not all of them are on the board yet. I think that's probably my easiest way to do that piece. Then when you find a battery, If it's limbered, it has a traffic accident. It's disorganized and loses a gunpoint. If unlimbered, it suffers an ammunition explosion, firing canister against its own hex, and the hex suffers morale change and all other effects accordingly. So, ouch. Kind of lucky. First of all, there were, by a quick count, which might be wrong, a dozen guns, so a 12-sider handled it nicely, or I could do with a couple of 6s. And it ended up being a limbered gun, which makes life a little easier. I guess I lost a gun point someplace important, but a canister from one of them big heavies or something could have been really ugly. Although it never goes above 5 fire points. It's kind of funny. Sometimes the table. So one heavy gun at range 1 is worth 2. 2 is worth 3. 3 is worth 4. 4 and 5 are worth their number. And I'm not quite sure why. And of course, when you're looking at canister, I don't know that the heavy artillery is all that much better. But because the way canister is handled is you roll for twice as many shots. But I don't know that the weight, I mean, you could pack more shot in, that's for sure. But the cone of fire is not significantly more, and probably the distance isn't any more, just because of the size of the charge and everything might be increased, but you're really not doing that much when you're putting canister in a bigger barrel. I think maybe people are more familiar with using shot in a shotgun can tell me, yeah, it's a big difference between, a 10 gauge and a 20 gauge when you put buckshot in it, and that might help. That might help determine, unfortunately, or fortunately, not something I've done. All right, onward. So important casualty results. Napoleon's still alive and able to function. So he's back on the board. I'll have to contradict my Facebook feed. Massena, on the other hand, died. And all the other commanders who've been wounded, whatever, Molitor, there's no one really that important. Fresnel, I'm sure they're important to their family. But yeah, there's no one else terribly, impactful. Losing someone like Fresnel, first of all, is probably replaced by someone who's better, but maybe not. Maybe the same rating. Let's see. No, he was a 0, which means he's really bad at accepting orders. Of course, he's also just a divisional commander, so he may not have to do that. And he's replaced with a 1 who is not a fighter. I'm not extending the scenario rules. There's a scenario rule that all the Austrian commanders were quality, in combat, etc. You feel like maybe that's going a little too far and giving them all fighters. But they're also lowly ranked that, they probably all do deserve that 2 rating. It's just, I would have no problem with a 2. The problem that I have is that the game is got a binary switch. Are you a 2 or are you not for almost everything? The one thing that it's not the case of is in close combat, the superior leader gets a benefit on his unit's morale check. It's just like a +1, so it's not major. Like before, you send a 4 leader in, he gave you a +4 to your morale check. Was it a +4? Yeah, I think so. I think even a 1 leader gave you an advantage, even though 1 leaders were, there's no bad leaders in the game, except by special rules, who disincentivize their troops. Otherwise, not a hell of a lot. Lannes and Napoleon are sitting here together with one of the Imperial Guard commanders I guess that's good enough to command the entire guard to give them an order. So I just don't know. There's no commander of the guard. I would think Curiel was probably more in command, but it's all the same to me, and I should be able to command it as a formation. It doesn't say use divisional orders on each unit as far as I remember. I could fucking look it up. But it's just it's a screwed up. One of the things here, I don't know. It's a set of divisions. I guess they have to be given divisional goals. You can't command the guard as a whole. Okay, I'll live with that. There's a lot from the original rule book for this Aspern Essling. It never felt as polished as, in certain ways, as a scenario, as some of the earlier, as a couple, well, the two earlier ones, which were Austerlitz, where the core rules needed a lot of work. And then Marengo, which felt fairly polished. This one felt kind of, there's a lot of special cases and they weren't really well handled in a lot of ways. Anyway, what else do we have? We have the dice to go here, and yeah, we'll start the new day. We'll move the Dean marker for the day over. It looks kind of like an unhappy sun or a happy sun. I don't know. It's hard for me to walk away and stop chatting because I know this is the end for today. And with luck, forever. Right, trying to squeeze the Austrian turn here in on a Saturday. I'm feeling okay. And usually Saturday night I can squeeze a turn in there. Unfortunately, my shadow raid thing, they give a whole pile of energy points at once a week or whatever, maybe once every 5 days, because it seems to move which day you get it. And that came yesterday, and I obviously didn't have time last night to play it, and then when I got back from dancing, I played a little bit, and then been playing it pretty much nonstop today, trying to not really burn through the points, but use them effectively. And because as long as you're above your cap, you get no free points, just regeneration points, and those regeneration points are significant. They're your full capacity a couple times a day. So I've wasted a couple hundred points that, had I been, not going out last night, wouldn't have happened. But I have to go dancing. That's one of the few things I do. Okay, so I started the Austrian turn. I think I've gotten my last order out. No, not quite. Whoever, Fourth Corps here, who's that? Rosenberg. Still hasn't gotten orders. But everybody's got their orders out to them. A couple of people, the Reserve and the Second Corps, have actually accepted their orders and can act on them. But I don't know how much I want to act on them, because I pretty much, you can almost default right into my orders unless I put something elsewhere. Get your units in good shape before you do shit, which means, recover your stragglers where you can, recover any morale hits and whatever. So I'm working on that. By the way, I got 2 of my review copies, so I'm probably not going to finish this before I go on to something else. I'll come back to it, as I always do. There's enough of a battle. If Napoleon had died, I don't know what I would have done. But, then I have Talavera to do, and then Espinosa as well. I don't know the order of those 2. But wait, there's actually 2 in Talavera. I don't know. So there may be like 3 more battles to do in this series. And unfortunately, none of them really excite me because the terrain is painful in all of them, I think. Okay, but one thing you'll notice is I pulled out more of those straggler recovery markers. They're also the low ammo markers. Again, they got rid of these counters in one of the few scenarios that could have really used the old ammo handling rules instead of they made this abstraction for the French who are actually under ammo restrictions, which doesn't match the old style at all. But the straggler recoveries, I think these guys are going to actually help me. So for example, I've kind of moved my units while I place them, but so over here, not all my units. Over here, I identified one unit that I cannot move. Here things are more complicated, and I'm going to have to go into all the pain in the ass. When you have a lot of units that have to recover, and some of them are sitting under morale effects, that just causes pain. No matter how I handle it, it's going to be kind of painful. I couldn't just identify a couple of units that need to be, basically I'd have to paw through each of these units. There may be one in there that doesn't get a chance to recover, but I've moved the ones that do, but then I have these 2 morale impacts. Over here I identified there's only one unit I can recover, so the rest of the command can move. I haven't done that yet, and the same thing here. And that's very helpful, because now I've clearly identified, these are the units I can't move if I want my straggler recovery, and I can take it off during my movement if I desire to move. It just makes life a whole lot easier, and getting rid of those counters, I mean, I kind of get it. They were just a convenience marker on the back of something that the rules no longer support, but still, I find them incredibly helpful. Unfortunately, because I have to fish them out of a single bag for Austerlitz, because my Austerlitz didn't come in a box, so I stored everything in a bag so that I could keep it with my mag games. It doesn't really, I don't have them all available, but I might have enough. All right. See, the Austrian line has shifted to handle defending the areas that are most important to me. I got to get the 4th Corps somewhere up in here. I haven't written the orders for it yet, what it's exactly going to be. I'm not sure, because I have this cav force that could kind of cover a gap if I need to, which might make more sense, because I might want the sturdiness of the infantry more in the way of these 2 towns up here that I'd really rather the French not take. Basically, if the French can hold this, presumably with the Aspern Essling combination. I'm assuming they can retake Aspern, I'm not sure. Because there's a lot of flexibility. I've given flexibility to both 2nd and 6th Corps to cover into Aspern as needed. If they can get the bridgehead over here and a path out, that's pretty important. That means not only do they have the bridgehead, but they have roads that'll get them out. And Gross-Enzerdorf, it's kind of weird, because if I have this path out, Gross-Enzerdorf should be more valuable than it is. If I have this path out, it probably isn't that important, right? So it's like, might make sense to have more variable points, because its importance to threatening the line going up there becomes somewhat valuable. On the other hand, it also extends the bridgehead and maybe makes it possible for an additional bridge to be built across here or something. So maybe it's fair that it's just worth X amount no matter what. I don't know. I've decided the only sensible way to interpret the order situation with the guards is that each division has to be given its own orders. It's the French side of the turn, and Napoleon's stacked with Dorsini. Now, I think what I want to do, so here's the thing. I know what the Austrians are going to do, but I look at the situation and I don't know that I'm safe. I think what I want to do is I want to commit one of the guard forces over into the Essling area to help defend it, because that looks weak. I don't necessarily know that I'm going to be able to make a significant counterattack everywhere. When I do, I think it's going to be on the Aspern front. So, I'm trying to formulate, hey, what will I do? What should I write as orders without using unknown information? And then sometimes I throw a die for that. But in this case, I think I'm going to send this division over into the Essling area. Probably, I don't know which side. That's the problem. Like, I'd like to defend the breastworks here, but the threat seems greater on this side. Of course, I've got a lot of cav, and the cav can do, as we've seen, a pretty damn impressive job. Given that there's not much terrain here, it seems like the cav is better situated for that. So I think that I'm going to rely on that and send these guys up to the breastworks or dike or whatever side of Essling. I've also been kind of fudging as I go, allowing myself semi-defensive orders, because it doesn't make sense to me not to have them. Sometimes those orders, and here's the thing, you can probably do them under the concept of complex orders under the version 3.0 rules. But the idea of like, defend this territory and give ground slowly if needed. First of all, there's two problems with it. First of all, you have to go with if you're ruling that's a complex order, and maybe that's the way to go, you're going to have a harder acceptance than just defend this to the last man. Yeah. And you're also presumably going to start facing core attack failures. It's kind of weird, because I've already kind of fiddled in with hey, look, you shouldn't be getting your core attack failures until you're actually taking casualties and stuff. It doesn't make sense. Once you start moving, you keep moving until you stop moving for a reason. You don't just, and sure, there might be a road issue or something that could be represented by that. You can always come up with hand-wavy explanations, but to try to capture, this is a game that's trying to reach an intuitional, level of, hey, this is what's happening. It's really happening. And it's not some sort of design for effect type game. In which case, you really shouldn't be pushing those types of things. I just feel like there's a type of order that's missing. And that is the defensive order, some form of defensive order. And yeah, so I'm going to kind of fudge it and create what I consider an active defensive orders, because the default defense, well, why is it a default defense if there's nothing else you can do to defend? You feel like they were creating room for a defensive order. And under the old defensive orders, the option the core defense failures had a bonus. You know, here I wouldn't be playing with that bonus anymore, which again, it feels absolutely incorrect. I just feel like that bonus should have been tweaked, but I've said enough on that, I think. The matter is, I may have undergone a similar type of fighting with the orders system to try to come up with how to make it work for me under the original rules to these games. I don't remember. You know, but I do know that things like the bolting down rules definitely caused problems, and I'm pretty sure I shaded them a little bit back then even. I did the day change marker at the wrong point. A little weird because technically our days change when it becomes 12 o'clock, and I've always read these as the beginning of the turn at that time. That could have just been a goof up, or maybe it's like that in all of them. Maybe someone doesn't understand what happens in the late period of the night. But yeah, I mean, you know, anybody who yeah. Anyway, that's the end of the French side of the turn, and this is just a mess, you know. Troops milling about, camping, whatever, awaiting their orders to take place. I finally, I don't know if I've been checking, Fourth Corps finally pulled its headquarters back. Of course, it may be more exposed here to some kind of, again, the flank attack type situation. But I don't want it any further forwards. It certainly didn't belong where it was, in the middle of a swamp, right at the front line. But where it is not great either. There's tons of stuff to protect it. But if somebody just wants to collapse the Corps, they could just go walk over there. And again, you know, there'd be a lot of warning of troops coming here, but I can't move it within that warning because of the way the defensive orders are handled. In fact, my orders were just move the headquarters because that's all I care about. The default defense or whatever is exactly what I want underway. Anyway, that's probably it for tonight. I'm really in a bad state where the pain is great, and you know, it gets amplified, right? It gets amplified because of shit that I have to deal with. It's like, as long as I can numb myself to everything and pretend that the world is in stasis forever, it's just pangs when I go to deal with things. But then add on to that, yeah, I've got like an interview on Monday, and I know it's going to be harsh, and I just want to avoid it, you know? But somehow that, again, focuses the lens on the pain and makes it worse on everything else. Inside of the 1 a.m. turn, nothing interesting really happening. Just recovery across the board. New orders went out here. I'm trying to use complex orders to express a defensive order. Probably won't require core attack stoppage unless they're attacking, but I don't know. You know, I mean, would it be better to just say default defend, man? Core range is probably enough to do everything I want. Yeah, it probably is. I don't know. It's so fucking annoying to have the need to write orders that the system doesn't really allow for, and that I'm not quite sure how to fudge. Again, taking away defensive failures and defensive orders makes it a much more difficult situation because, you know, I put that corps headquarters back here, and I can defend the Esslinger Hof sector, which is what I want to do, and fall back and largely defend Rasdorf. You know, it's 8 hexes, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 from the corps to the divisional. So, you know, being back here, I would have probably an adequate defense, but barely not. You know, there's a possibility the French might march up this way towards Rasdorf. And again, I feel like, you know, default defense means hold the line, not shift all the way over, when actually it probably does allow me to shift over, but it wouldn't give me, well, I don't know, it would give me flexibility to defend all over the fucking place. Maybe, you know. It was an oddity that 4th Corps headquarters had to be positioned, and it had to be. It was like scenario rules put it in a specific location range, and so, you know, but that has, I felt burned by that, right? Those are probably scenario rules from the old system that just carried over and without much consideration about you know, the fact that the command system has shifted somewhat. Oh, I don't know how much. I don't know how much, given that like defensive orders were probably not heavily used. I don't know. I always used them. Still struggling my way through, but now it's late at night. It was morning last time I was up here and did a half turn. Doing the French half turn. As soon as I get done and the daylight is starting, I'm taking a break because I've got a couple of things that I agreed to do as opposed to this that I'm just piddling around with when it comes down to it. I hope I can devote more effort. But yeah, my game is killing me. So on the French side of the turn, I haven't completed the mechanical side of things, so the straggler markers are still out, but Curiel's guard is moving. They accepted their orders immediately. The other guard unit, I don't know who's in charge there, Dorcine, and of course the guard cav under Enrique, but Dorcine hasn't yet agreed that he should do his orders, and Napoleon's going to go talk to Oudinot. I think I'm going to use Oudinot as the main force of the attack. Using guard for an attack when you don't need to is a bad idea because there's a morale impact. I don't know if it's written down here what the value is. I don't think so, but it's in the scenario rules. But yeah, it fucks with lots of things. So you don't want to get your guard wrecked is basically what it comes down to. And I think there's a restriction in this one. And that's probably it for tonight. I got cut off early. I came back to talk about something, which is I don't know if I remember. It takes about a half hour to pull stuff off the camera. What the hell was it I was going to say? I don't rightly recall. But this is the end of this video then. Unlike last time, I'm not going to just let it crash because I was intending to play 2 more turns. I'm not going to do that because of reasons. But yeah, I have a more limited storage on this camera now than I should, but in some ways I think that's fine. My videos get too fucking long when I have the full storage. Just trying to think what it was. Like, there were 2 things I wanted to come back and say, and I cannot for the life of me remember. The bridge failed, but I think I already told you that. So the reinforcements got pushed down a little further. But I feel like there was something to do with the straggler counters or something along those lines. But I can't recall. I'm sorry. All right, so up it goes, and I'll be doing a play test as my next thing for the Battle of Königgrätz.